Thank you for staying with us. Now, Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger have made a choice that will echo far beyond their borders. They recently stood up to an international court in The Hague, not with guns, but with a paper, a formal notice that they are leaving the International Criminal Court. Now, they say that the court has been unfair to African countries, calling it a tool of neo-colonial pressure and promise to handle justice their own way. Legally, the exit won't take effect for a year, and any ICC investigations already opened will still carry on. But people on the ground, the story, for the people on the ground, the story is quite messy. Supporters have actually cheered reclaiming of sovereignty, while critics worry that without the ICC's watchful eye, abusers could go unchecked where courts are weak. Now, the world will be paying close attention to what happens next. Joining me on the conversation to speak more on this, we have Héni Nsaibia. He's a senior analyst, armed conflict and event data project. We also have Daniel Eizenga. He's a research fellow, Africa Center for Strategic Studies, National Defense University. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us at this time.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so let me begin with you, Héni. Héni, these governments, are calling the ICC a tool of neo-colonial repression. Would love to have your thoughts, and if you think, do they have a point about the selective justice that they're talking about?
I mean, to one degree, there has been an African bias within the ICC. However, many cases have often been referred by African governments themselves. And also important to note that in recent years, many other cases globally has been highlighted. We have the case of Ukraine, Gaza, with arrest warrants for Vladimir Putin and Benjamin Netanyahu. So I wouldn't totally agree with it. But the withdrawal also comes in the wake of a previous withdrawal from the regional economic bloc of ECOWAS. So it follows really a trajectory of political isolation, I would say, but also that these countries are pivoting away from regional frameworks and also former Western partners towards Russia, as we have seen with the deployment of the private military company, the Wagner Group, but also the Africa Corps that now has replaced Wagner. But it also comes amid the rise in political violence globally, and also a trend of, I would say, impunity at the international level. And for them, it could make sense to jump on this bandwagon as even powerful actors like the US and Russia. They try to shield themselves by imposing sanctions and also issuing arrest warrants for ICC officials.
Okay, let's hear from Daniel. Daniel, we know that legally their withdrawal takes a year to kick in, and the ICC can still pursue cases already opened. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this because Héni did talk about how he doesn't totally agree that they're neo-colonial, and the fact that even powerful nations have issued arrest warrants for, ICC members. So in practice, how much protection does this move really give the leaders of these three countries?
I think it, in the event that it goes through and they do in fact withdraw from the ICC, that it does provide a certain level of impunity that wouldn't exist otherwise. I think that is at least partially the intent behind the withdrawal. I think importantly, all three of these juntas in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have been looking for ways to scapegoat their own responsibilities onto imperialist actors, and they use a rhetoric of neo-colonialism, going after Western countries in particular to mobilize support politically for themselves on the domestic scene. And so when they can point the finger at neo-colonial entity that helps them to avoid blame for things that are going poorly back at home. And I think I see this as part of that continued strategy. I think it's also worth noting that there have been cases at the ICC that Mali has supported. In fact, 2 cases that have gone to conviction and sentencing on the part of Malian terrorists that were convicted for crimes against humanity in Timbuktu. And there continues to be an open case at the ICC for the leader of JNIM, the most prominent militant Islamist group operating in Mali. There's a case open against Iyad Ghali, the leader of that group. And so, in some ways, their withdrawal from the ICC is sort of it's nonsensical in that the cases that have been pursued at the ICC on behalf of Mali have gone after the militant groups that are creating such insecurity and instability within Mali. So I see this more as a continuation in the populist politics of these junta leaders as they try to further shore up their support at home.
Okay. Let's come back to you, Héni. Héni, earlier you talked about Wagner, and we know that these 3 countries have been members of the ICC for 2 decades. But, now they're walking away while building closer ties with Russia. So would you say this is really about justice or more about shifting alliances?
Impact on justice and accountability. And there's also one of few mechanisms that could provide victims of atrocities with reparation and justice. And as Daniel highlighted, there has been cases related to Mali with Ahmed al-Faqi and Al-Hassan Aga Abdulaziz. However, those cases only represent a microcosm of all the atrocities that have been committed in Mali itself and in the Central Sahel more broadly. So there are a few trends that I want to highlight. For instance, in the past few years, we have seen a significant surge in state violence, in particular by state forces. In the case of Malian armed forces alongside their foreign partners represented by the Wagner Group and Africa Corps. And in parallel, we have a similar trend in neighboring Burkina Faso, for which the ICC hasn't opened any investigation. And this trend has come against the backdrop of Ibrahim Traore rising to power.
You've talked about impunity. Daniel has also reiterated that, this opening the door for impunity. But then, Daniel, if the courts of these 3 countries are weak, are there other real alternatives, that they might have to hold these people or to hold people accountable?
Yeah, so, this to try and tie together the conversation here, I think the real risk here is that this removes kind of the final layer. The role of the ICC is to provide justice in contexts where victims have exhausted all other avenues to receive redress for crimes against them. And so it really should be sort of the final stop in pursuit of justice. And so because if this withdrawal goes through in the next year, that will mean that several alleged crimes, human rights abuses that have taken place, potential war crimes that have taken place over the last several years, they may not ever get to the ICC because pursuit of justice in those cases will take quite a long time. In fact, the cases that we've mentioned at the ICC for Mali, those were all crimes that were committed in the period between 2012 and 2013. So it took several years for those cases to reach their culmination. And as part of that process, in the past, citizens of Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger would have been able to pursue justice through the regional court system of ECOWAS. But of course, these 3 countries have withdrawn from ECOWAS. So that layer of justice has already been removed as well. The juntas have all said that they're going to establish some sort of Sahelian court system, but establishing a court system that would cover the same types of crimes and work to fill this now gap that the juntas have created will likely take quite a long time to do. And it's far, in my mind, it's very unlikely that such a court system created by the juntas themselves would actually serve in a way that would hold the juntas accountable as well. We've seen in each of the three countries that the juntas have worked very hard against the different court systems that are in place in their countries. And so they're really trying to establish a system to their benefit so that they don't have to worry about being accountable to their populations. And so I think this is a very worrying situation.
Héni, do you feel the same way? Because even the UN has raised concerns about, possible war crimes by national forces and even foreign fighters. Do you think that this withdrawal is partly an attempt to avoid scrutiny?
Absolutely. I totally agree with Daniel. So when speaking about this conflict, it is an extremely protracted conflict. It has been ongoing for well over a decade, and in particular marked by impunity. And I also underline that atrocities have been committed by all various armed actors, including jihadi groups, state forces, and various militias. So it's really something that has come to characterize the broader conflict that has, while it began in Mali, it has spread across the central Sahel and also to the northernmost regions of coastal West Africa.
All right, let's quickly come back to you, Daniel. Daniel, so in future, if a civilian government wanted to rejoin the ICC, how easy would it be, to reverse this particular step, and what message do you think that will send?
Well, I think it depends in part on when that civilian government were to come to power. I think that the situation in all three of these countries has been steadily deteriorating for quite some time, and so it remains pretty fluid. If you had a civilian transitional government come to power to try and restore constitutional rule, civilian-led democracy in these countries, such a transitional government would be able, I think, to withdraw the withdrawal announcement, so to speak. And so if that were to happen in the next year, I don't think it would be particularly challenging. To formally rejoin the ICC after withdrawing would likely take some time and documentation, and it might be a bit more challenging to do from a bureaucratic process. But I also can imagine that in these circumstances, given that all three of these countries are currently militarily run, there would be an avenue to pursue that, assuming that you had a constitutionally based civilian elected government in power.
Okay. Now, these same countries, already quit ECOWAS and also set up their own Sahel bloc. Does leaving the ICC deepen their isolation or strengthen their push for independence from Western institutions? Héni?
Yes, absolutely, and that is something that I previously mentioned. So it really follows this trajectory of political isolation, including from ECOWAS, but also former Western partners. And by doing so, they try to shield themselves, but also consolidate legitimacy locally. And by framing their political approach in neo-pan-African terms, that is the way that they have managed to exploit some anti-Western sentiment along their constituencies that basically are found mainly in the capitals, less affected by conflict. However, jihadi groups, they continue to expand, but also to consolidate territory in many rural areas and impose their own form of social order and very rudimentary governance. I think in even the past few weeks, we have seen how the Al-Qaeda-affiliated Jamaat Nusratul Islam al-Muslimin has imposed an embargo in the western and southern parts of Mali, targeting fuel trucks on key transit routes, and we are beginning to see even spikes in fuel prices. So even when speaking about sovereignty, it's very relative in this particular context.
Okay, so Daniel, if these countries refuse ICC oversight, what leverage does the African Union, the UN, or even Western governments really have left to press for accountability?
Like I said, the ICC is intended to be sort of a final measure to provide accountability. And so when you've withdrawn from it, it really does take away, the last possible step to hold government actors or others accountable in parts of the world where justice systems are inherently weak, or there are certain special interest groups that benefit from total impunity within a particular justice system. We've seen that play out across multiple contexts in the world, not just Africa. And so this really isn't a uniquely African problem. It's a world problem where you have actors that do not have accountability to their justice systems. And I don't think that the AU or Western actors really have a strong set of mechanisms right now to hold these juntas accountable. And I think that that's by design. There's sort of an inherent irony behind this notion of sovereignty and national identity that the juntas claim as the motivation for their actions, when in reality what they're doing is removing all of the potential mechanisms that would hold them accountable to their population. And so by doing that, they're really breaking down the entire system.
So we're about wrapping up. Daniel, we'll ask you this question and then come back to Héni before we wrap up, because aside these three countries that have actually complained, many other Africans have actually argued that the ICC has focused too much on Africa, while powerful countries escape scrutiny. So would you say that is a fair criticism, and if so, what reforms are needed in the ICC to avoid, more countries coming forward saying they want to leave?
So I do think it's a fair criticism in the sense that the numbers are backed up. There have been more cases brought against Africans generally than there have been against others. And there certainly are examples in the world of powerful countries not joining the ICC and thus avoiding accountability in that way. But I don't think that the solution to that is to withdraw from the ICC. I think the solution to that is to make stronger demands that all countries are actually part of the ICC. And I think that that's where the difference is. It doesn't make sense to disband or to completely withdraw from this organization prior to it accomplishing what it's capable of doing. So I think what we need is greater accountability, not less. And what these juntas are doing are using that criticism to turn it around and then escape accountability on their own terms. So they're using that criticism to accomplish their own ends and support their own efforts by maintaining the impunity that they already enjoy through military rule in their countries.
All right. Now, quickly, if you may, Héni, let's have your final thoughts as well, and if you think there are reforms that are needed in the ICC.
The criticism that could be raised within the ICC among the member states, that is something that prominent human rights organizations like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty already have highlighted in some statements they have put out in reaction to this withdrawal. But as I said earlier, this is part of a more global trend of impunity, and when powerful actors shield themselves, it is easy for less influential states to jump on the same bandwagon.
All right. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time and for speaking on this. Héni Nsaibia, a senior analyst, Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, AC-led West Africa. And we also had Daniel Eizenga, PhD, Research Fellow, Africa Center for Strategic Studies, National Defense University. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.